Welcome to Watch and Learn. Today we're going to give you 4 tips on using rulers in a border. I'm Kristina Whitney, and with me we have Kelly Ashton, and we're Handi Quilter Studio educators. So, Kelly, I know you love borders.
And we both love rulers.
Yes. So let's combine those two and share some of our ideas and things that we've learned over the years of using these rulers in the borders.
Yeah, one of the stumbling blocks to using rulers is how to make them fit perfectly in your border. So,
yes.
Excuse me, if you have a 4-inch template, but you have a 26-inch border, you know, how does that math work? So we're going to help you. We're going to give you some tips on how you can stitch with rulers in a border and make it work out evenly or enough that it works out right. So,
yeah, that was probably the hardest thing for me with using the rulers and the borders. I just couldn't get them to fit, and it was just frustrating.
Yeah, me too. When I first learned how to use, in fact, the swags are one of the first ones I used in a border, and they make such a beautiful design, but none of my corners were the same because I just didn't know how to make it work out evenly across the quilt. So.
Yep, that is an issue.
Right, so we have 4 tips that we're going to give you about that. So, but before we start, let's tell you a little bit about this quilt behind us, because we like to change the quilts so we can kind of do a little showcase on some of the quilts that we have hanging at Handi Quilter. And once again, we have a vintage quilt top that was pieced by an unknown quilter, but one of our national Handi Quilter educators quilted it on her Longarm machine, and it was quilted by Judy Hayes. She's out of Colorado. And she used quite a bit of Pro Stitcher designs in this, but we chose this one specifically because of her border design. Yep. She did stitch that with the Pro Stitcher, but you could also stitch something like that with the template. So we want to kind of focus on, excuse me, borders and how you can make them work out evenly. So, okay.
Yes. Well, Kelly, I see you've got some, is that adding machine tape?
Yep, so we're going to talk about adding machine tape, and should I do this one first?
Sure,
okay.
You've got it there, let's go for it.
Yeah, I learned this tip quite a while ago, and this is adding machine tape. So you find it now in your vintage stores, or somewhere like that. You know what it is, it's just paper, it's just rolls of paper. So what we've done is we've cut this adding machine tape the length of our border. So this will stretch all the way across the border of this quilt. Okay, and then what I did is I took the template that I wanted to use on the border, which on this quilt we're going to use swags. So this is, we have 2 sets of swags, and the one we're working on is the 5.5 by 6, and each swag set comes with 4 rulers. They each have a different height to their swag. Okay. So there's the 4 rulers that go with that. So what I needed to do, so the clue is they're 5.5 inch by 6 inch swags, right? So I know that it's going to stitch 6 inches across. That's how wide the swag will quilt. If you can look at this one right there, I drew the swag right on that paper. And then I started folding it, but I couldn't fold it right on my drawn line. I had to fold it like 1/4 of an inch on each side because that's where my stitch is going to be. If I draw this on the paper, my stitching seam is not going to be right where my drawn line is. It's 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. I have a frog in my throat today, sorry.
Would you like a drink?
No. Okay, so I folded this paper. I just kept folding it. The tricky part is you have to be pretty exact with your folding. And I ended up with 9 swags and then about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch left over. So that means 8 of my swags will be perfect and one of them will be a little bit bigger. Or what are some options I could do with that? So I like the adding machine tape because it helps me to have a visual of exactly how far across these borders or these templates are going to stitch across there. Now we do also have a handy dandy calculator on our machines.
Yes.
So I could have done the math, right? But this is kind of a nice visual, and then it lets me see exactly what I have left over. So I would take this adding machine tape and I'd lay it out on my quilt, and then what I would do is make a little mark, and this is some of our new invisible panda pencil. So it's a new marking tool. And we would just I'd make one little mark at each of the creases.
Now,
okay?
Before you mark on your quilt, always test it first.
That's
Make sure that whatever marking tool you're going to use will come out.
Right. Okay, but I forgot to mention, Kristina, that I ended up with about a 1/2 inch too much for my 9 swag. So I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with that extra 4.5 inch. Okay, so the tip is your eye first is drawn to the corners of a quilt. So if you look at this quilt up here, the lights are kind of right there, but your eye goes to the corner. So I need my corners to be the same.
Yep.
And then the second place your eye goes is to the center. So that's, if you're going to have anything different, that your eye is going to pick out those 2 spots. So ideally, what I would do if I wanted these swags to go right to my corner is that I would do 2 swags exactly the length of my template, and then I might make the next one just like 1/8 of an inch bigger, the next one 1/8 of an inch bigger, and then my center one, it's going to be exactly the size of my template. And then when I get to the other side of the center, I'm going to have 1/8 of an inch too big, 1/8 of an inch too big, and then exact and exact. And your eye will never pick out the discrepancy in those sizes when it's in the center of this center, right? It's, as long as your ends are the same and your center is the same, your eye won't see that little tiny bit of discrepancy. So that's tip number 1, is how we can use adding machine tape to help visualize the space that we're going to fill with the templates.
Okay.
So you had a tip.
I do mine a little bit differently. Yeah. Okay, so this is a quilt that my grandmother pieced that I am wanting to do a swag in the border. So the way that I was taught to do this is I'm going to actually measure my border. And for this one, I'm not going to put anything in the cornerstone or in the corner. Okay. So I'm just going the length of the border down. So if you hold that, that'd be perfect. Whew, the table's barely long enough. Okay, I am at 73 1/4 inches.
Okay.
So I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. And then Kelly, what swag ruler were you using on yours? The 6 inch?
I was using the 6 inch.
Okay, I'm going to use the 4 inch then.
Okay.
Can you use that fancy dandy little calculator over there? And we're going to do some math.
I can. So your border's not quite deep enough for the biggest one, but that's okay. You don't have to use all 4.
That is an excellent point. Right, yeah. And when you said deep enough, so if you guys can see that, that's the edge of my border there. If I were to stitch this out, I'd be going off the edge. So I'm not going to use that one.
Okay, I got the handy dandy calculator up.
Okay, let's do 73.25 divided by 4, because we're going to do the 4 inch swag.
That time it worked. So you should be able to get 18.3 swags.
18.3 swags.
Yeah.
I can't do 18.3 swags and have it look good.
Okay.
First of all, I don't know how to do a 0.3 of a swag.
Okay.
That could be a problem.
It could be.
So here's where we're going to round. So you can either round up and do 18 repeats and make them a little bit smaller.
Round down, okay.
Sorry, did I say round up?
Yep.
So I could do 18 repeats, and if I did the 18, then now you got me confused. Which way am I going? If I round down, I make them a little bit bigger. If I round up to 19, I'm going to make them a little bit smaller.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
all of them? Are you going to make all of them bigger or smaller?
I'm going to make all of them bigger or smaller.
Okay.
So
I can't wait to see how you're going to do that.
Evenly spaced.
Perfect.
So another thing that I like to think about when I'm doing this is, do I want to have even or odd number of repeats? So if I find like the center of my quilt, do I want to have a swag right at the center point?
Okay.
Or do I want to have like the point in between two swags? So those are things to think about when you're deciding if you want to round up or round down. For this one, I'm going to round down to 18 because that's closer to the 18.3.
Sure, okay.
So I'm going to do 18 repeats of 4 inches. Now I've got this elastic here and it's marked. It's not exactly 2 inches because I stretched out the elastic and then marked in even increments.
That's awesome.
When it's just relaxed, it is not 2 inches, but they're evenly spaced.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So I'm going to count. So I'm going to say that's 2 inches, 4 inches. So that's 1 repeat, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 repeats. Okay? So that's the mark I'm going to use.
Got it.
So what I'm going to ask you to do is line up that board so the big burgundy mark on the elastic lines up with the...
Oh, right on the edge.
Right on the edge. And then can you pull that other pin out for me?
This one?
Yep.
No.
Sorry.
Oh, she really...
So these are my grandmother's
she really
quilt
put
frames.
it in there. Oh, my.
And you could use any kind of a board.
Got it.
If you use something really thin, you could just use binder clips to hold it on. So I've got that end lined up.
Okay.
I'm going to stretch my elastic, and my edge is out here. So I'm going to stretch it to right there, and I'm going to, I guess I should keep it even in the board. I'm just going to put a pin in. So now everything is stretched. So it's not exactly 4-inch increments. It's a little tiny bit bigger.
Okay.
Are we doing bigger or smaller? Keep getting confused.
You made them a little bigger because
Okay.
you had 0.3 that you had to make up for. So these are a little bit bigger than 4 inches.
Okay,
Just
so
barely, though.
just barely. But the fun thing is that it's evenly spaced.
I love that
I don't have
idea.
to worry about,
Yeah.
okay, this one I need to make a little bit bigger, this one's okay. They're all going to be even. So I'm going to take a marking pen, which I've pre-tested, and
Okay.
I'm going to do a mark on the quilt. I'll do it on that side. And sometimes I also like to make the middle mark also.
So you can line up the middle.
So I can line up the middle.
So when you're stitching out the template, it isn't bigger. So how are you going to make this bigger?
That is the fun part.
Okay.
So we'll move this away. So we're going to say that's our middle point and that's the edge.
Okay.
So I'm going to line up using, I'm going to first of all turn it the right direction.
The good point. So let's really quickly, I don't mean to interrupt
Oh,
you,
no,
but how
go
do
for
you
it.
know which is the right direction? So all of our rulers have markings on them, and the markings are etched in there. So this line, I would line up right across my seam, and if I had it upside down where the etching was up towards me, it would distort it, so it wouldn't be a correct measurement. So when she said she's turning it the right way, she's got to turn it so their etched marks are down towards the fabric.
Yep, good point.
Okay?
Okay, so I would line up the etched line on my seam, and then I would, here, let's make some marks down here so it makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so I'm going to have my foot start here, and I want it to end over here. So as I'm stitching up,
Okay.
I'm just gradually, little tiny minuscule movements, moving the foot or the ruler over. So when I get to the top, I want the top of my ruler
Arc to be centered.
Yep, centered with that other mark. And this mark I made over there we'll just ignore because that wasn't in the right spot. And then coming down, if I, hypothetically speaking, if I had to get back over to there,
That's your target spot.
as I'm stitching along, I'm going to be gradually moving the ruler just a little bit at a time, and you're not going to notice those little tiny movements.
Right.
And when I get down to this point, I'm right on track.
Okay. I do it very similarly. I'm going to show you just a little bit different. So if I'm starting here and I know that I have an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch to make up for, I'm going to stitch around to the center, and then I'm going to scoot my ruler over that 1/4 or that 1/8 of an inch, and then I finish. But if you have your target spot drawn on the fabric, you just have to eyeball that 1/4 of an inch, and then you can kind of see it. But instead of gradually moving it as I stitch, I stitch to the center and then I move it over just a tiny bit. So it works either way. I do get a little longer center arc where your arc is just kind of gradually arcing over. So
Yeah, and depending on how much it's being stretched or shrunk, because you could do this the other way where you have to shrink it in a little bit, that would also determine exactly where on the swag I'm going to be moving at. So I do like doing it up at the top because that's a good way to shrink it in, because you can't really shrink as you're stitching. It's easier to stretch it out as you're stitching. But
your eye isn't going to see these little tiny differences. So those are just both ways that you can kind of make adjustments with the templates or the rulers, so that you can, it's nice to have your target spot kind of drawn on there so that you can make that little adjustment as you go, whichever way you choose to do it. So,
and let's be honest, when we're using rulers, sometimes they wiggle anyway. So you're not really doing anything that much different. It's that you're intentionally moving.
You're intentionally hitting the spot.
You want it to go. Yep.
So one thing that we need to say, that when we're using templates, I definitely want to have the handy grip in place. That's the little, it's not really sandpaper.
It's got that gritty texture,
It's got a gritty texture, and it just really holds to your ruler, your fabric really well. So that handy grip helps to have too much shifting as you're stitching. So.
What are some other good safety things that we need to talk about with rulers before we do some stitching?
You tell us where you're thinking.
Surefoot.
Oh, thank you. I'm like,
and normally I would say we need a ruler base also, but we are going to be stitching on the Capri today, so we don't need the ruler base because it's got the insight table that's already there.
Yeah,
so,
right.
But yeah, a Surefoot helps prevent your ruler from hopping over.
That's right.
And
it has that higher profile, so it's nice. But okay, we've given them 2 tips on how to use rulers. So we said we were going to give them 4.
Oh,
so
we have to think of more?
We got to give them 2 more. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to grab this pad of paper for just a minute.
Okay. And I'll move this out of the way.
Okay. So tip number 3, if I'm going to use templates on a border. So we're going to say we've already measured out like we did for either of us, okay? And we have even, we're going to say we have even swags across here. Look how even they are.
They're beautiful.
We have a couple of options here. We can make our cornerstones completely different design. Or if I had, say I was doing the 6-inch swag and I had 4 inches makeup, I might just choose to use 2 inches on each end. So let's say I was here, I might use 2 inches on each end, and I might just do kind of my own swag kind of in the corner like that. So remember, as long as my corners are the same, it's okay if they don't match what's inside here, right? And then the other little tip along with this is if I wanted my corners to go to the edge, but I didn't quite have enough space in the middle, I could choose to just make a completely different design in the center.
Oh.
So I have several options there. I can make different designs on the corners to use up extra space, or I can use a different design in the center. That's really a lovely design, isn't it?
It's gorgeous.
But you get the idea?
Yeah. While you're drawing, I noticed in this corner you did 3 of the swags. How would you stitch out a border, like on a?
If I was going to do all 4 swags?
Yes. Say you were going to do it on one of the free motion frame mounted. That's the word I'm looking for. The frame mounted machines.
Well, here's how I like to stitch them out.
Full border at once.
Yeah. If I'm going to do the full border across, there's 4, right? So if I went 1, 2, 3, 4, I end up on the wrong side.
Yes.
So when I'm going to do them across the border, I'm going to take the first swag, and I'm going to stitch that swag. Okay, I'm not going to use the rulers, right? I'm just going to switch or stitch the first swag across, and then I'm going to go back the other direction and stitch the second swag.
Now, for people that might have issues with thread breaking going right to left, you can always start on the left and move to the right with all of the layers.
Usually when you're doing some sort of curve or arc, it's okay. It's straight lines where you're going to run into the most problem, stitching right to left. Okay, and then I've done 3, so 4 is going to take me back the other direction, whichever way you decided to go. But I generally decide to stitch out the whole first row and then second, third, and fourth, so that or I could go 1, 2, 3, 4 and stitch in the ditch along the next one. So There's not a wrong answer.
Another good reason to do this is what if you accidentally marked wrong and you did all of this work and you got to the very last one and realized that you were off by 2 inches?
We aren't going to do that.
We never mess up, right, Kelly?
It's a good point. Yeah.
So make sure, do that first one all the way across.
Yeah.
Make sure everything is in place before you go back and do the others.
I would mark definitely my marks all the way across before I started stitching.
Yep.
Okay.
So do you have to do all 4?
All 4? No. We aren't going to do all 4 in yours.
No. Do we have any samples that show how we can play with these swags?
Let's show you some samples. So these are samples that we have in the studio. And can you see that 3 of the swags have been stitched out on this row? And this is kind of a reminder, these samples, that rulers just can be used like as your foundation. You can add all kinds of fun stitching to the foundation work of rulers. Here's also some swags right here. And then I'm going to flip it over. And we have a couple of swags right here.
I love the idea of being able to embellish the swags. It doesn't have to be just this arc line. You can add stuff to it.
Look at the fancy feathers that they stitched in these swags right there.
Oh, fun.
I really like to kind of do some dense quilting in maybe every other one because it really makes the one that doesn't have the extra quilting pop out. So I'll show you on this quilt. This is the one we're going to stitch on, maybe. So this one I have stitched all 4 of the swags, and then I just did some piano keys on the border. I love the look of the straight line against the curve.
Yes.
So, but the one trick here is that I don't like when you do piano keys, I don't want to follow that curve. Like I don't want to stitch in the ditch along that curve. So when I do piano keys against a curve, I stitch in and stitch straight back out on the same line. Into the curve and straight back out. When I'm doing piano keys against a straight line, I'll come in, go across, back out, over, across. But I just really don't like to try to follow that curved line exactly. So I'll go straight in and straight back out.
Why don't you like to follow those curved lines?
It's physics. It has to do with physics.
Isn't it super easy?
All the wheels are in motion. I'm done with physics. Well, I guess I'm not.
Math and physics in one Watch and Learn. That's our limit there.
Okay, that's 3. You got to give us a 4th. What's our 4th?
So another one is that we can work from the center out.
Oh, there's a
kind
thought.
of like, actually, let's just leave this up here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to grab a different color though.
Okay. I had another color.
Oops. It fell on the floor. I just grabbed it.
Oh, okay. There you go.
So you can start in the center and say, okay, I've got this much space. I'm doing the 4-inch rulers. I've got 3 extra inches that I need to fill. So that's exactly what you did here, where you can put something in the middle. So I would do something 3 inches here and then work my way out, going both ways.
Okay.
And then that way you don't have to do all of the stretching or shrinking to make them fit. You just have whatever you want in the center. And that adds also a little bit more interest to the quilt.
I'm going to say I've done kind of the same, well, kind of the opposite. I start on both sides and work to the center.
And then fill it in?
And then fill in the center.
Both ways work,
yeah.
As long as you're getting the thing done.
Yeah. Okay.
One other thing, other than working from the center, we talked about cornerstones. And you showed here that you can add something similar to a swag, but going around the corner. You can go completely different. So like up in this area, say I wanted to put like a star, because I'm not really good at drawing and I'm much better at quilting. So I'm not even going to attempt to do some fancy motif. But you could just put a motif or a block in there.
Sure.
And that takes away from having to measure or try to get the same look.
Right.
Just do something completely different,
I
but
like
still goes along with the quilt.
Perfect.
So, those are my tips.
All right, so we're going to do just a little demo. One of our favorite rulers is a swag set. So, and we do read your comments. And we know that you want to see stitching demonstrated with rulers on the stationary machine. So we're going to just do a little demo on how to work with the swag rulers on the stationary machine. We have the Capri machine right here in front of us, okay? And I've got this quilt all basted. And the trick to using the stationary machine and rulers, get your stuff out of the way first.
But you've got that table there to collect everything.
I know. The trick is to get, well, one of them, there's quite a few tricks to working at a stationary machine, but you want to get the bulk of the fabric up on the table. So the tendency would be to just kind of have the border right here, but I'm going to switch and do it opposite. Okay.
And we did turn the
way.
lights off for filming purposes, so if people are wondering why they can't see the lights.
Oh, I've got threads everywhere. I'm sure.
Is that your basting?
No, it's not my basting. Well, imagine that. Threads all over our quilting room. Okay, so you can make a nice accordion. You can just flop it up there. You can roll it up in a pool noodle. You can put clamps around it. But the trick is you've got to get your quilt up on the table. Okay?
And I love this table with that extension, the side extension that comes up.
Whoops. Well, I'm going to work right here just because this is where I'm at. Okay? I'm going to use a swag. You're right, I'm not working on the corner. I'm stuck. So one of the ladies who does a lot of quilting on her stationary machine is Debbie Brown. She's one of our educators, and she has a great video on using the stationary machine. And one of her tips is that she'll put like a pillow that's covered with a slick fabric, you know, like the tablecloths, vinyl, and she'll put it in her lap so that she doesn't even get drag on her lap.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That and you don't get batting fuzzies all over your clothes.
Yeah. I'm not lined up anywhere. I'm just going to stitch, all right? So here's my template. I'm just going to line that template up right on my seam.
So that edge mark that's on the template.
And I'm going to use the little
sweet spots.
Sweet spots. I got to bring up my bobbin thread first.
I'm going to skid in closer so I can see you.
If you have a light foot, you can push it once and bring up your bobbin thread. If you have a heavy foot like me, you have to be careful because I want to push it more than once, okay? So I'm just working with this quilt, this fabric that's in front of me. So the rest of it's got to be up here, right? And people who are good at this, they just have nice soft hands. Me, I tend to do a little more gripping, okay? So this helps me right here, hold on. And it doesn't have to be fast. I'm going to stop and I'm going to readjust because I've got to smooth out that fabric right there. Okay, and then I'm going to bring it around and finish out that swag. Now, one of the major tricks is that I have the the Handi grip on the rulers, because if I don't have the Handi grip and I try to drive, my ruler is just slipping out from under me, just so hard to hold on to. And it is a little trickier to do the rulers right here on the border, so I think that's why the paddles work better for me. So I'm just going to do one more. I won't make you watch too much longer. Okay, we're going to stitch around here again. I'm going to go as far as I'm comfortable. And on curves, you kind of have a tendency to go away from the curve, so you have to really...
I call it going out for ice cream.
Sure. So you need to stay here with your hamburger or something, I don't know. Okay, we're going to finish going around that curve. There you go. And I'm going to bring that up. They're not perfect, but there's a couple of the swag stitched out right there. So when you're stitching on a stationary machine, focus on just the area that you have beneath you. The rest of it, you need to just have it stabilized somewhere so that you're not worrying about that. And just do one at a time. I find that when I'm at the stationary machine, it's really important to just do one element at a time. if I'm quilting a flower and I'm at the stand-up machine, I'm thinking flower, flower, flower. When I'm at the stationary machine, I'm like petal, petal, petal. I just have to take one element at a time, and then I can get through it better. So, but these paddles help me a lot when I'm moving the fabric around like this. So
you're using the sweet spots there. We've
I
got the
keep calling them
paddles
pedals.
also.
Paddles. Yeah, here's the
How
paddles
did
right
those
here.
work for you?
The paddles?
Did you try those with the rulers? Or?
They were too big for the rulers.
Okay.
So I didn't like using with the rulers. So, and you don't have to have these sweet spots with the rulers. You could just hold the ruler with the handy grip. It holds it in place.
Just an added bonus.
Yeah. Can you see how, if I'm just holding onto the ruler?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is that you want to be good at, I don't care if it's ballet or baseball, soccer, feathers, whatever it is, just a little bit at a time, just practice it every day. So when I wanted to learn how to do the stationary machine, I just sat down for 10, 15 minutes a day and practiced pebbles. I was just doing pebbles, pebbles. It took a couple of weeks, but I started to see some improvement on it. So whatever it is you want to do, just give it some time and effort, and you'll be good at it. So, right, okay.
So hopefully you guys learned a little bit about using the rulers in borders, and you're not quite as intimidated. So go ahead and give it a shot and have fun quilting this week.